Move on. Let's change the focus of our criticism to not to a guy we think is going to be a leader of the Democratic Party, but to a woman who is the leader of the Democratic Party. Now, back in April, when the CARES Act had already passed, and there was a lot of criticism about the CARES Act. There was a criticism about the structure of the bill because it gave corporations essentially a green flag on this racetrack that everybody else got a yellow flag in, and was going to have negative impact down the road in terms of what it did with wealth inequality and concentration of power and whatnot. And then there was another criticism, which was, this is very bad negotiation strategy. It is, you are devoid of understanding where leverage is coming from. You have given the Republicans all the corporate goodies they want, and you have put no time limit on it, and there's no term on it, and it simply is open-ended. And then everything that you want is time limited and term limited, essentially, and also narrowly tailored. So when Nancy Pelosi passed these bills in the House and did it without really any type of real debate, wouldn't bring people back, wouldn't set up some type of massive Zoom call, wouldn't have any real opportunity to vote against it or agitate against it, didn't share it with a lot of people. This is passed in the democratically controlled House. They did not include support for municipalities. They did not include support for states. They did not include support for the Postal Service. They did not have automatic extenders, essentially, or automatic renewals, or for things like unemployment insurance, increased benefits pegged to unemployment numbers. None of that. And they were criticized. And in fact, we played this clip of all people, Jake Tapper, raising this criticism. And because it was criticism that we were leveling, that all our guests had leveled, a lot of people on the left were leveling. And I got a lot of emails. Well, how do you know better than Nancy Pelosi? Let's go back to that moment in April.
Right. You and Senator Schumer made this major concession on the most recent legislation because you made it okay in this one. Further,
it wasn't a concession.
No. Well, I mean, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo.
I understand what Andrew Cuomo said, and I respect his perspective as a governor. But the fact is this: they wanted $250 for the PPP. We support the PPP. We're part of developing it. Small business is entrepreneurial, part of the optimism of America. So we're for that. But we wanted to include more people and more money for the program and for the hospital. So it was always an interim
Pause it
bill.
1 second. Just to be clear, this is now she's talking about the second sort of CARES Act, where the Republicans supposedly wanted a more narrowly tailored PPP. And the Democrats wanted to open it up because a lot of people didn't have access to the first round because they didn't have the relationships with the banks and whatnot. Fine. I think there was a little bit of kabuki there by the Republicans, and a lot of that money sat on the sidelines, it turned out, in terms of the PPP. And they did get a little bit more about hospitals, but they did not realize that the Republicans wanted to expand the PPP. They were getting, this is the Paycheck Protection Act. They were getting criticism for it. This was the last bite at the apple. That's what everybody kept saying. The Republicans want something. You need to leverage it. Continue.
And for the hospital. So it was always an interim bill. It was always an interim bill. We always said that CARES 2 would be the bill where we would go for state and local.
Right.
And we will in a big way.
I get that, but I just want to play for you the sound from New York Governor Cuomo, because he said he needs money for his state to save New York from an economic tsunami. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We've been talking about funding for state and local governments, and it was not in the bill that the House is going to pass today. They said, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, the next bill. I said to my colleagues in Washington, I would have insisted that state and local funding was in this current bill, because I don't believe they want to fund state and local governments.
So Cuomo says he would have insisted on state funding in the last bill. And now Senator McConnell is saying he wants to push the pause button.
Yes.
Was this a tactical mistake by you and Senator Schumer?
Just calm down. We will have state and local, and we will have it in a very significant way. It's no use going on to what might have been. The administration never even wanted to do. Let me recap this for you. When we said we're not doing 250 unless you open the door.
We don't need to hear any of the remaining excuses here. Okay. Calm down. When we say that we're going to come back and get state and local support, we're going to do it. And in fact, when she says CARES 2, it ended up being called the HEROES Act in the House. And the HEROES Act does have, they passed the bill that has support for local and state governments. But I don't know if Nancy Pelosi was being obtuse or she genuinely did not understand the situation that Jake Tapper understood, that apparently Cuomo understood. As much of of what Cuomo generally wants is crap. He understands how to get it. And what many people on this program, guests that we had on this program, myself, I mean, was not a profound insight that you have given the Republicans everything they want, and they have no incentive to come back and pass whatever you pass now. So yes, she passed in the House a huge bill for state and local governments under the HEROES Act. But now here she is on Dana Bash explaining what we need to do to get that money to state and local governments who are now being crushed. And we see it in the context of schools. We see it in the context of layoffs. We see it in the context of shrinking Medicaid rolls. We see it, across the board. Play this.
Are negotiations going to resume, or are negotiations dead?
I hope so. We have a big difference, and here's why. For example, millions of children in America are food insecure, and their families as well. But I always like to focus on the children. In our bill, we have tens of billions of dollars to address the hunger needs in our country, which are there normally but exacerbated during the pandemic. We have tens of billions of dollars. They have $250,000. So do they care? I have a prayer that I say, let's pray for those who are hungry. Let's pray harder for those who will not feed them. Then we go to the Princeton lab on eviction lab says that we need these resources. There are going to be this many millions of evictions, and the president is going to study it. They're going to look at it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Now we don't need to. So the idea is in April, it's take it easy. We're going to pass a bill. And in August, it's pray for everybody. Ugh. The bottom line is it is the case that the Democrats have done it. And it is the case that the Republicans have stood in the way of this. But it is undeniable that either Nancy Pelosi has no idea who she's going up against and no idea how to address them and no idea how to prioritize needs so that she can leverage what little power she has in controlling only one branch of the government, or she's just full of it. There's no third answer here because everybody knew. And if I knew and guests we had on the show knew and Andrew Cuomo knew and Jake Tapper knew, everybody knew. And they pretend like to get upset about this is silly. There was no pressure on the Democrats to expand the PPP in that moment. And getting funding for hospitals in the middle of a pandemic, for them to think that the Republicans were not going to, they basically said, you pretend you don't want this and we'll pretend we're delivering it. it's really just, and here's the thing. The reason why it's very important to point this out is so that people understand going forward that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer do not know what they're doing. There are multiple examples of this, starting at the end of 2017, where they cleared the decks going into the fall and took the Republicans off the hook on a myriad of things that allowed them to pass those tax cuts at the beginning of 2018. They have failed on multiple fronts in terms of their tactics and their strategies. I get where their politics are. That's all well and good. They don't necessarily share the exact same politics with them, but they are bad at being opposition leaders. Their politics are going to come more into problem when they are bad at being majority leaders. But
I hear prayers are a delicious and nutritious breakfast, though.
The real question is how many different flavors they come in. That's where you have the real dilemma. What flavors are we going to do?
All those starving kids out there, they're going to eat the chocolate prayers, I think.
Colin from